So how does the world respond to Trump? How does the world tread this path for the next 4 years? Joining me now is Mr. David E. Sanger. He's the White House and National Security Correspondent with the New York Times newspaper. Thank you very much, Mr. Sanger, for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. So Trump has clearly made immigration his number one issue. He's ordering troops to the southern border. There's an emergency on that border. He's even, passed an executive order to remove birthright citizenship. And yet at the same time, I think yesterday in comments at the Oval Office, he said he likes the H-1B, which is a temporary work visa. So what really is Trump's playbook when it comes to immigration? Because seemingly these two seem a bit contradictory on the face of it.
They may seem to be. First of all, the first thing to understand about Donald Trump is he's the son of immigrants, right? His father's family initially came from Germany. His mother was directly a legal immigrant to the States, as most of us Americans, myself included, are, if you go back just a few generations, immigrants. His campaign was, as you rightly point out, driven very heavily by the immigration the illegal immigration across the southern border. In fact, those numbers were going down considerably starting about a year ago, when President Biden, quite belatedly in the minds of many Americans and some of his own cabinet, took some steps that I think he probably could have taken, should have taken early in his presidency. The presence of these troops may make a difference. It's been pretty quiet there so far. The issue that, of course, has grabbed so many people in India is the H-1B visa, which is a work visa for highly skilled people who are coming on a temporary basis. And, of course, the president has been highly dependent on a lot of donors from the technology world. He's had Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy right by his side. And they've been arguing very much for an expansion of the H-1B visa. But this has caused a little bit of a split, an amusing one, between his very wealthy technology executive supporters and his base, who probably don't know a whole lot about how the H-1B visa system works.
I do want to ask you, though, one can understand, like you said, it was a big campaign point for him, immigration. Maybe there is political capital there as well to come across as, going after these, as he calls, illegal aliens who've come into the country. But the problem with ripping off or trying to rip off birthright citizenship is that it affects legal immigrants as well, not least H-1B visa holders, but other kinds of temporary work visa holders who are planning to start a family in the U.S. How does that make any sense?
So here he's got one major problem. He's done this by executive order. And of course, the birthright citizenship issue is a matter of the U.S. Constitution. It's embedded in the 14th Amendment, which was passed after the Civil War in the 1800s. And he is trying to use a novel interpretation of a small bit of its wording to see if he could get away with wiping out birthright citizenship. And, what inflames his base is there are cases, certainly, of people who come across the border illegally and then have a child, and that child then is immediately an American citizen and with all of the rights that come with that. Most of the legal authorities that we've spoken to think his effort here will fail.
I do want to come to the other two issues, which are, one, tariffs. He's threatened tariffs 25% on Mexico and in Canada starting the 1st of February and 10% on China. And I guess he's using tariffs as some kind of a negotiating instrument. If these countries don't respond the way he wants them to, what are we looking at? Not just from February, but for the next 4 years, because nothing's stopping Canada or Mexico or China from imposing their own tariffs on American products.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the oddities of listening to President Trump on these issues is he has a hard time differentiating between his allies and his adversaries. And he has a hard time differentiating between the use of tariffs to right an economic wrong. For example, in China's case, if he was placing tariffs on state-subsidized semiconductors that are being shipped to the United States, undercutting U.S. semiconductors because the state is making them cheaper to produce, that would be a classic use of tariffs. This 10% use that he is threatening is because of China's role in bringing fentanyl into the country, frequently through Mexico. In the Mexico-Canada case, he simply wants to rewrite not only NAFTA, the old North America Free Trade Agreement, but the free trade agreement that he himself renegotiated in his first term. And there, I'm sure he's just using it for leverage. There is every risk, as you suggest, that he is just going to start a tariff war, and that the ones that will be hurt the most in many ways will be American consumers. And one of the big questions, since he got elected in part because of anger at inflation in the United States, is whether these tariffs are themselves inflationary.
I want to come to the two wars, and he has said on numerous occasions, including after taking office, that he wants to end both the Russia-Ukraine war and the Israel-Hamas war. I'll start with the Russia-Ukraine war because he's put out a long tweet last night where he's basically said this war never should have started in the first place, and that he's giving Putin time to cut a deal, and then Putin should accept this deal, and then Russia is hurting, and so on and so forth. Why should Putin accept a deal? And under what terms?
Well, the big question right now is Putin even interested in negotiating? Mm-hmm. The assumption is, here in Washington, among some of the NATO allies, that the casualties have been so great for the Russians that Putin wants a way out, a way to declare victory and get out. And it's very possible that Trump will provide him with that, because one of the things the Biden administration said early on was that Putin should not be rewarded for his aggression 3 years ago, not quite 3 years ago. Now, it appears entirely possible that if he pulled off a negotiation in which Putin would basically be able to claim 20% of the country, that 20% where the Russian troops are already, and get a commitment that Ukraine would never join NATO and would remain neutral and so forth and so on, Putin would be able to claim that victory, and perhaps he would get a Korea-like armistice. We don't know if Putin is ready for that. And we also don't know if Putin wants to press his arguments further and call, as he did before the war started, for the pullback of NATO troops from former Soviet states. And that would be a really hard run as well. Other big question, is the United States ready to participate in a security arrangement for Ukraine so that Putin does not just take this time and regroup and try to take all of the country again?
And finally, on the other war, Israel versus Hamas, we've had a temporary ceasefire that was announced last week. Trump was asked about it on his very first day in office, and he didn't seem pretty confident that the ceasefire would last. He said it's their war, not ours. What do you make of it? Does Trump think that he can actually end the war between Israel and Hamas?
So he is eager to get this first phase through, which includes the release of 33 hostages. We've seen 3 of them so far. And the big question is he ready to move on to the next phase? And there, he's acting more like the United States can be a bystander than an active participant in that process. It's not clear how interested he is in it. It's not clear whether he is willing to press Bibi Netanyahu on this, because getting to the next stage would mean deciding in the end who's going to run Gaza. The U.S. has said who it can't be. It can't be Hamas, but not indicated who it was prepared to go help stand up a government there. And of course, Netanyahu is under huge pressure not to do this because it could tear his government apart and toss him from power. So this is going to be the moment where we are going to discover whether President Trump is willing to stand up to two of his oldest friends, one of them being, of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu, but the other, in many ways, being Vladimir Putin.
All right. David Sanger from the New York Times, thank you very much for your time, your thoughts, and your perspective into the very first week of Donald Trump in office. And I guess we have 4 more years of that. Thank you.